James had been asleep for barely 4 hours when the pounding started. Not a knock, a hard, deliberate pounding, the kind meant to shake more than wood. The clock beside him read 5:34 in the morning. He rose without a word, pulled on his boots without bothering to lace them, and crossed the cold hardwood floor of a house he had legally owned for exactly one night. Through the peephole, he saw 2 men in tactical vests wearing patches that looked official but weren't, and beside them, a woman in a dark pink blazer holding a tablet like it was a badge of authority. Before he could even open the door fully, she demanded to know why he was inside a home that had sat empty for 12 years. He told her the simple truth: the house was his, inherited, deeded, completely legal. What she said next was stranger than anything he expected: that his land technically belonged to a homeowners association that hadn't even existed when his uncle first bought the property, and that he had 72 hours to leave or face what she called enforcement action. James stayed calm. He always did. He asked one simple question that made her confident expression flicker for just a second. Exactly who would be enforcing anything against a legally recorded deed? Behind her, one of the tactical vested men glanced nervously toward the SUV idling sideways in the driveway. Lights still on. No visible plate. James closed the door slowly, the deadbolt clicking into place, already sensing this woman had just made the biggest mistake of her career. 3 days earlier, James had been a complete stranger to Cypress Hollow. At 49 years old, he was a retired federal investigator who had spent 2 decades untangling logistics fraud. And if there was one thing his career had taught him, it was that paperwork could cut deeper than any argument ever could. When his estranged uncle passed away, he left behind 60 untouched acres and an old farmhouse that had stood decades before the surrounding subdivision was ever built. James inherited the property without much expectation, hoping only for a quiet retirement, fixing the gutters, planting a few tomatoes, and enjoying coffee on a porch that belonged entirely to him. Before signing anything, he had done his research. County records were clean. There was no HOA covenant attached to the land, no shared association, no annexation ever filed against the parcel. His uncle had apparently fought off a similar association decades earlier and won, a fact buried inside a dusty court ruling from 2007 that James stumbled across while digging through the property's history. He assumed that Old Victory had settled the matter for good. The neighborhood beside his new land, Cypress Hollow, looked like something pulled straight from a glossy brochure: matching mailboxes, manicured lawns, and a welcome sign proudly announcing community excellence. On his very first day there, James noticed a woman watching him from across the fence line, arms crossed, her dark pink blazer catching the afternoon sun. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She simply watched him carry boxes inside, almost like she was quietly building a case. Looking back, James wished he had paid closer attention to that stare. The first real blow landed less than 24 hours after that unsettling dawn visit. James discovered a freshly poured concrete post near his private drive, anchoring an actual steel gate and chain across the road he had used to reach his property for years. There was no court order behind it, only a laminated flyer claiming the road was restricted to Cypress Hollow residents and authorized personnel. Walking the length of his fence line, James found the mistake almost immediately. The new concrete footing sat directly on top of the original survey marker, the century-old pin that had always separated his land from the association next door. Whoever installed that gate hadn't bothered checking a single legal document. They simply decided the land was theirs because they said so with enough confidence. He called the county surveyor, a sharp and no-nonsense professional named Alvarez, who arrived within the hour and confirmed exactly what James suspected. The gate sat nearly 2 feet inside his property line. No easement modification had ever been filed. No petition existed anywhere in county records. She called it plainly an illegal structure built by people who believed ownership was decided by confidence rather than actual law. James documented everything and filed his first official complaint that same afternoon. Karen Mills, he would soon learn, considered that simple complaint nothing less than a declaration of war. The retaliation came fast, and it came petty. James' water pressure died completely on a Tuesday morning without warning. Tracing the line back to the shared pump station, he found his pipe severed clean, tagged with an orange HOA label claiming the connection was an unauthorized tap. Days later, his mail stopped arriving altogether. A visit to the post office revealed someone had filed a forged forwarding request, rerouting his letters to a P.O. box registered under Cypress Hollow Community Services, complete with a signature that barely resembled his own. Then came the citations, 4 of them within a single week. Unapproved paint color, excessive nighttime lighting, non-compliant landscaping, a supposed architectural review committee James had never heard of, and later confirmed didn't legally exist, began taping warning notices to his door in the dead of night, always caught by his newly installed security cameras. The final incident came on a Thursday evening, when 2 uniformed men claiming to represent a so-called community safety division showed up at his gate holding a stapled eviction notice tied to a resolution James had never seen, from a board that had never once contacted him properly. Their SUV had no visible plates. Their badges were plastic. When James refused the notice, one of them stepped forward as if he intended to force the papers into his hands. James didn't flinch. He simply reached for his phone. James pressed the panic button wired directly to Sheriff Ortega's office, a connection built through years of trust rather than luck. Deputies arrived within minutes, and everything began unraveling fast. The men's identification turned out to be completely fake, and their SUV was unregistered, leased quietly through a shell company tied directly to Karen Mills' own husband. That single thread pulled the entire scheme apart. A forensic review of Cypress Hollow's internal records revealed the truth. The 2019 vote supposedly annexing James' land had never actually reached quorum. Several of the listed signatures belonged to residents who had passed away years earlier, or who had never lived in the community at all. The falsified boundary map matched an architectural file created by a company registered to Karen's husband, dated months before the fraudulent vote supposedly even happened. The most damning discovery was an internal email pulled from HOA archives, where Karen had written to her own board admitting that moving quickly meant nobody would question them, since no one was living on the property yet. That single detail became the centerpiece of the entire case against her. Karen was arrested during a community luncheon, loudly insisting she represented ultimate authority in Cypress Hollow, even as deputies calmly read her the very rights she had spent months pretending James never had. The trial lasted 6 days, and the jury needed less than 3 hours to reach their decision. Karen Mills was sentenced to 14 years for fraud, forgery, criminal impersonation, and attempted unlawful eviction. Her closest collaborators received 4 to 8 years each, along with fines exceeding $200,000 combined. The court dissolved the Cypress Hollow HOA entirely, citing years of systemic abuse of power. Every illegal gate, sign, and fraudulent checkpoint was removed within 72 hours under direct county order. James eventually received a settlement exceeding $500,000, covering damages, legal fees, and the emotional toll of the entire ordeal. He used part of it to repair the water lines Karen had once severed and planted a new oak tree where an older one had died during the conflict. Beside his private road, he installed a simple wooden sign reminding visitors the property answered to no HOA, and underneath, in smaller letters, a polite request to knock first. Now, on quiet evenings, James sits on that same porch and watches as cars slow down near what used to be Cypress Hollow. So tell us, if your own community tried something like this, would you fight back or simply walk away?